The Harwood building stands as the iconic symbol of downtown Scarsdale, showcasing the distinctive Tudor Revival architectural style that represents the village's commercial center. Most of these architectural gems were constructed in the 1920s by the Scarsdale Improvement Corporation, which still owns much of the land here. The Harwood building, as well as the first East Parkway building on the corner of Popham Road, were designed by the Schultz and Weaver architecture firm, whose founding partner, Leonard Schultz, lived in Green Acres. This building was named for George A. Harwood, an engineer who was one of the original owners and directors of the Scarsdale Improvement Company, who passed shortly before the building was completed. The local businessmen who formed the Scarsdale Improvement Company in 1920 did so to protect this land from being bought up by out-of-town speculators, and instead planned and built a high-quality commercial center. However, our story really begins by the Bronx River, across from the Scarsdale train station, which was the center of Scarsdale's initial business district. On this site in the mid-1700s, Scarsdale resident Samuel Crawford operated a mill powered by the fresh waters of the Bronx River that ground local farmers' grain and sawed their timber. During the Revolutionary War, Crawford was captain of a patriot company, and he became Scarsdale's first casualty, killed by British loyalists in a skirmish in Eastchester. Major William Popham, another Revolutionary War hero who served as an aide to George Washington, later acquired the mill and the surrounding land. The Pophams owned an extensive farm, which included most of the land that later became Scarsdale's downtown. When the New York and Harlem Railroad was constructing its track northward from New York City in the 1840s, it needed a right-of-way through the Pophams' property. Not only were the Pophams able to ride for free, but they arranged for the train to stop on their signal on a section of the tracks here known as Popham's Gate. Now, Scarsdale was too small for a train station, since it then only had a little over 300 residents. So the closest scheduled stop was at Hart's Corners, what is now Hartsdale. However, by the 1850s, the new railroad started to bring change to Scarsdale. Businessmen and land speculators started acquiring farms for development and summer estates. For example, in 1853, Charles Butler purchased a tenth of the town, creating a large estate that would later become the Fox Meadow neighborhood. Scarsdale didn't become a scheduled train stop until 1877, and Popham Road, which was then known as Station Road or Depot Road, crossed the tracks at grade until the turn of the century. George Ullman was a well-liked station agent and Scarsdale's postmaster for over 30 years. He was born in Bavaria, Germany in 1821 and taught school and gave music lessons before immigrating to New York in 1848. He landed the position of station agent in Scarsdale in 1858 and lived for the next 17 years in a room at the old train station. In the waiting room, he prominently hung a portrait of German Emperor Wilhelm I above his well-used piano, and in the evenings he entertained friends there who gathered to sing and dance. When he married Sophie Lacht, a local nurse, he went right back to work 15 minutes later, and the couple relocated to a quaint cottage right behind the station. Scarsdale's townspeople were especially fond of the couple's well-trained dogs, known for carrying George's lanterns and flags. In 1902, the railroad replaced the old wooden station with this more attractive Tudor-style station for a cost of $10,000. This design would become the defining architectural style in the downtown area. Around this time, the old Popham Mill area and much of the land near the Bronx River was acquired by Scarsdale Estates, a recently formed real estate company. This company would later plan the development of Green Acres, Heathcote, and the Overhill area. And with the goal of attracting new homeowners arriving by train, the company spruced up the area around the station and the former mill and created a small park by the Bronx River, which residents continue to enjoy today. This bridge here is the successor to the bridge that was first built in 1902. Before then, Popham Road came down and it crossed the train tracks at grade. In 1902, they built this up, put a bridge, made a large embankment over there, and so the geography of this is totally different than it was back then. The southeast corner of Popham Road and Scarsdale Avenue, where there's a realty office today, is where perhaps the first real estate office in Scarsdale was located, started by Henry Angel, sometimes also pronounced Angle. Henry Angel and his son Stephen soon moved the office down Popham Road to near Garth Road, closer to the train station. The tiny post office, which had previously been housed in the train station, was in the small wooden building next door. Stephen Leroy Angel was a central figure in Scarsdale's development. Born in 1878, he left school to join his father's real estate firm as a young man. The Angels sold lots for the Arthur Suburban Home Company, which developed a 150-acre farm in Edgewood that became Arthur Manor, Scarsdale's first suburban neighborhood, on the Post Road just north of the Eastchester line. Henry and Stephen Angel were heavily involved in the community. They joined the volunteer fire department in Arthur Manor, and in the same firehouse, Henry Angel helped start the Arthur Manor Sunday School, which evolved into the Scarsdale Congregational Church. Stephen Angel published the Arthur Manor Society of Christian Endeavor newsletter, which he continued to publish as the Scarsdale Inquirer until he sold the newspaper to the Women's Club in 1919. Stephen Angel was also the village historian, and he had an extensive collection of photographs of early Scarsdale, which he donated to the Scarsdale Library. So he's one of the main reasons we have an early visual record of the village. Here at the corner of Popham and Garth Roads is where Scarsdale's earliest stores were located. The Florence building here was initially opened in 1913 as the Simon Building and was only one story. Angel Real Estate and the post office moved in, along with Scarsdale's first grocery store, Flag and Hooley, Lukert's Meat Market, and the plumbing firm of Curran and Curran. A few years later, the building was raised to 3 stories and given a Tudor design to try to match the buildings across the street on Depot Place. Now, across Garth Road was a building that there's no trace of anymore. It housed a real estate office, and the Bennett Funeral Home was originally located there. South of Garth Road was the showroom for the Scarsdale Supply Company, which sold the materials to build much of the village, as well as coal, wood, gasoline, animal feed, and so on. The company opened its doors in 1912 in a building north of Crane Road near the Bronx River Parkway, which is now used as a maintenance area by the Westchester County Parks Department. They originally used horses and wagons for most of their deliveries, and their last horse, Sam, only retired in 1930. The company expanded quickly during the building boom of the 1920s. They operated a yard next to Scarsdale's other railway line, the New York, Westchester, and Boston Railway, by Heathcote Station at the Five Corners. Train service shut down in the late 1930s, and that yard is now known as Supply Field. Across from the Simon Building on Popham Road, where a large modern structure stands today, was once a stylish Tudor-style building constructed by Scarsdale Estates in 1914. Scarsdale Estates' founder, James G. Cannon, was also a member of the Bronx River Parkway Commission, which spearheaded the enormous effort to clean up the polluted Bronx River and create the nation's first parkway, the Bronx River Parkway, which extended to Scarsdale by 1925. The parkway attracted more homeowners to Scarsdale, increasing the demand for stores and businesses to meet their needs. Scarsdale National Bank was established here at Depot Place, and its president, Rush Wilson, emerged as a key developer of downtown Scarsdale and a founding organizer of the Scarsdale Supply Company. Wilson had previously served as a land agent for the New York Central Railroad, and he was Scarsdale's president, the earlier name for mayor, from 1917 to 1920. The Scarsdale Tavern, which boasted an old English-style dining room, opened in part of the building in 1923 and was a popular spot. This location also marked Scarsdale's first movie theater, a relatively small one, where in 1922 it cost 35 cents to watch a show, and if you wanted a more comfortable seat, you could pay 55 cents for a squeaky wicker armchair. A more elaborate 1,100-seat Art Deco movie theater on Garth Road in Eastchester in 1931 replaced the theater. That theater closed in 1988, reopened briefly in 1995, and was finally torn down in 2002.
Before East Parkway was built up, the site of today's Heathcote Inn apartments behind me was the location of the Heathcote Inn and another early enterprise run by women. The famed Heathcote Inn was originally a farmhouse that became the Adams family home in 1868. William Adams moved his family to Scarsdale so he could be closer to the Scarsdale train station. They owned over 17 acres of land, which included an apple orchard and their own water tower. After William died, his widow sold some of her land to Angel's North End Improvement Company. They planned to divide and develop the property, but that didn't happen right away. Scarsdale Estates bought the property and rented the house to Layla and Carrie Lockwood. The sisters opened Heathcote Hall, which also became known as the Lockwood Collegiate School. It was a boarding and day school for girls, and the house was used as an inn during the summer months. In 1906, they bought land and moved the school into a landmark building on School Lane. In 1924, the surrounding property was subdivided for residence, but the building was saved. It became the Scarsdale Lodge and later the Scarsdale Inn for many years. In 1971, the Hoff-Barthelson Music School moved into the historic building. This school was also founded by two women in 1944. The Heathcote Inn was enlarged by Scarsdale Estates and under the management of Mrs. Mary Mackenzie. The inn became a favorite spot for locals and city folks during the summer months. The guest book even boasted a few celebrities, including Greta Garbo. Unfortunately, the inn closed its doors in 1947, reportedly over fire safety and zoning regulations, and the property was paved over for apartments, parking, and the widening of Popham Road. In 1960, the Inquirer spoke with John Coleman, the inn's head waiter, who started when none of the buildings existed on East Parkway. He recalled how woodsy it was and said, "It was a homey place to live, nice and quiet. Now it's growing up to be almost a city."
One of the most significant factors in the growth of Scarsdale was the arrival of the Bronx River Parkway in the mid-1920s. This was intentionally designed as a winding, rustic road in a linear park. Now, many of the unique stone bridges still remain, but as best as I can tell, only one original lamppost is still here. This lamppost on the on-ramp to the Bronx River Parkway has escaped removal, likely because its location is in this hidden spot between multiple jurisdictions, Westchester, which operates the Parkway, and Greenburgh, and Scarsdale. In 1923, this first large building on East Parkway was constructed by Scarsdale Improvement. Scarsdale Improvement Corporation was formed by Stephen Angel, Rush Wilson, and other local businessmen who pooled their resources in order to buy the land along East Parkway and create a commercial center of higher quality than outsiders would invest in. Within 3 years, most of these Tudor-style buildings along East Parkway would be built. The buildings on East Parkway were quickly filled with stores and offices on the first 2 floors. The higher floors had residential apartments that varied from 2 to 5 rooms. The Scarsdale Inquirer reported that the apartments, quote, had all the best labor-saving devices for the housewife, such as folding ironing boards, built-in china cupboards, and the latest electric dishwashers and refrigerators. So after this building was completed in 1923, the businesses from Garth Road wound up coming up here. So this would have been O'Farrell's Pharmacy, and it would have looked totally different back then. You can see now that it's the Chase, they've bricked over most of the windows and replaced it with these little ones, but these would have been big picture windows back in the 20s. Scarsdale National Bank relocated from Depot Place to East Parkway shortly after the first buildings were completed, establishing this block as a continued banking location. Angel Real Estate and the post office soon left the Florence building for the new Village Center, occupying space on East Parkway for several years. The supply company opened a large store on Popham and Chase Roads, selling everything from tools to furniture to household supplies. Mead's department store later took over the building and acquired much of the supply company's inventory. As you come down here, you'll notice that there's a lot of really nice details that cost money, right? And if you look at those windows on the 3rd floor up there, you'd have shops and offices on the first 2, residences on the 4th. You can see those rods on the sides of the windows. They're painted dark brown, they're kind of thin, maybe about 2 feet long. Those are the rods from the awnings that came out to cool down your apartment a little bit. A couple other things that you can notice is that even when the building is continuous, they did some really nice things like changing this brick to stone here to give it a feeling of being like an English town and having multiple buildings instead of just being one monolith. After the Harwood building was completed, they realized it made a lot more sense to connect these two. So they wound up taking the entrances to the apartments that were here, moving them off to the side, and creating this arcade that came from East Parkway on back to the Harwood building. And there's a few interesting historical things to point out here. One, this area is a little bit more of an alley than it used to be. So for example, over here, you can see from the brickwork that there used to be picture windows here. These were bricked over not that long ago. I think when the Scarsdale Women's Exchange was here, it went all the way through. But another thing that's really cool is if you come on over here, this was created as a doctor's office. So you have an entrance on that side. And then over here, you've got this doorway 6 feet off the ground. This would have been another entrance to the professional office. And you can see from the way the bricks were that there used to be a staircase here. That's since been removed. They put a gate over the door, and now it's just a wall. But once upon a time, this would have looked different. And down there as well, you can see the bricked over archways. So coming into the Harwood building, the post office moved over here from East Parkway. And there were a few other very, very long-time tenants here, including notably Vaccaro Shoe Repair, which is over here on the left, was here for decades, was really an institution back when people got their shoes repaired. People would come here, get all sorts of things done, and generations of the same family operated that store until it closed just a few years ago. Scarsdale's commercial area continued to expand to the northern side of Spencer Place in the mid-30s and 40s. In 1936, the Parkway Spencer Corporation constructed the Tudor-style commercial building on the corner of Spencer and East Parkway, where a grocery store has been for decades. The corporation also owned the land extending to Chase Road, but didn't construct this row of stores on the vacant land there until 1947.
By the 1920s, train access, automobiles, and a housing boom had drawn new residents with easy transportation and big city tastes. New stores popped up all over downtown. In 1936, Scarsdale Beauty Shop and Henry's Barber Shop were the first two businesses to ever open shop in today's DeChico's building. In 1932, this former country town was ready for the next step in suburbanization, its first department store. Meats took over the Scarsdale Supply Company's downtown location and developed a full-service department store at 1 Chase Road, spanning 3 floors and approximately 8,000 feet each. The day they opened, 3,000 people came through the door. You could buy anything from vitrolas to trousers to wheelbarrows to maids' uniforms. By 1938, all kinds of stores lined the main streets except along Christie Place, which, like Spencer Place, was mostly developed after World War II. Residents no longer had to shop in White Plains for their necessities. There were plenty of choices, including several different food markets, clothing boutiques, tailors, and hardware stores. But we also begin to have some familiar complaints around traffic congestion and limited parking spaces. The strict boundaries of the business district in Scarsdale were established through zoning ordinances that were first enacted in 1922. The regulations were designed to help to ensure Scarsdale would remain a village mostly of single-family homes and to keep businesses and industries out of residential areas. The original draft of the ordinance had extended the commercial zones to both sides of Popham Road, from the train station all the way to Post Road. But after much petitioning, the business district was vastly reduced to the area around where the Scarsdale Improvement Company concentrated its first buildings. Further revisions in the following decades allowed more stores, restaurants, and parking lots to open along Scarsdale Avenue and Garth Road. The development of multifamily dwellings like the Chateau Apartments and Popham Hall were closely regulated and restricted to commercial zones. With the rise in numbers of residents and commuters, the services of livery and taxi drivers became more important. Scarsdale Central Taxi is one of Scarsdale's earliest businesses on East Parkway, dating back to when people relied on horse and buggy to get around.
My name is Peter Blier, and I've been working here for the better part of 45 years. Started as a teenager as a taxi driver, and I'm now the manager. 1950s or 1960s central taxi advertising sign. It shows that we're here from the first train or to the last. This was the 2006 building. Where this building ends is the ending of the railroad property. So this is actually where that huge tower that was in our parking area was situated. There would be a row of telephones right there, and our little office that was basically big enough for a desk and a bench. This is where our office was. Central Taxi was established in 1912, originally in White Plains by Edward O'Brien, and it expanded to Hartsdale in 1916, and it bought this location from Thomas Fagan in 1925. So Thomas Fagan was in the livery and hack business in 1903, and the first car wasn't used as a taxi here in Scarsdale till 1913. So he would either have horses and buggies, he'd have sleighs, or he'd have what are called hacks, which was sort of a rent-a-horse and buggy. And you'd take the horse and you'd go about your business, and when you were done, you would come back and just leave the horse as you found it. It's sort of the city bike of horses. They were using sleighs up to and including when cars were introduced around here, because they were what could get by on the unplowed roads. And the horses were originally kept in liveries that were down at the lower train station. They had direct access to the Bronx River. They would take the carts, not the horses, and they would submerge them by pulleys into the river to wash them. The first car that was used as a taxi cab here in Scarsdale was driven by George Voss. The car that he chose, the Holtzman automobile, George described his first trip. A woman got in, said, "This is great, new modern technology, let's go to the post office," which was, a block away. The car stopped running at the post office. It got stuck on him a few more times, and George says the happiest day of his life was when he strapped 2 horses to it and towed it to Brooklyn. But we fast forward now to 1925. The Central Taxi at that point, with its 3 locations on the Harlem line, was a well-funded organization. And in World War II, they started to recruit female taxi drivers. And the female taxi drivers were former waitresses and cashiers and mothers. And they were quoted in the paper as saying that being a taxi driver is a really easy job. We've always had women taxi drivers. They've always been in the minority. It's interesting that there used to be a lot more men customers commuting. Over the last 30 years, women are more than equally represented, and probably in the taxi business, we probably drive a lot more women than we do men commuters.
Peter has a passion for exploring Scarsdale's history, and he guided us to an overgrown path hidden between the train station and the Bronx River.
This is the remnants of a road that once connected Crane Road to East Parkway to the train station. And so if you go to the end of where it juts out, you can actually find original parts of the structure.
Wow.
So, and if you'll see, you can see from here, there's the structure. And this is a metal beam, and it is in a big
And a
concrete footing. This was where the metal bridge that crossed the raised tracks, but it served the purpose of connecting Crane Road down to East Parkway to the depot station without going on East Parkway.
On July 4th, 1943, the village hosted a huge ceremony to unveil an honor roll in Boniface Circle, listing the then 1,100 men and women who were serving in World War II at the time.
But some of our boys never came back. Scarsdalians mourn the loss of Johnny Newkirk, nicknamed Scarsdale Jack. He was with the Flying Tigers in the American Volunteer Group that early went to the aid of stricken China. The campaign on Iwo Jima took the life of young Bruce Kingsley Stowell, member of the 3rd Marine Division. Bruce was not quite 19 when he was killed in an assault action in which his unit suffered the severest casualties. This is George Rosenfeld. The story linked with his name on a tombstone in the Henri Chapelle Cemetery in Belgium illustrates the barbarism of the Nazi enemy. His companions were captured as prisoners of war, but the Nazi commander had long ago forgotten that even in war, there are rules to be observed. In Scarsdale, the American Legion and the New York National Guard organized a sham battle. They practiced and trained on our once peaceful soil so that they would be prepared for any emergency.
In 1947, following the conclusion of World War II, a permanent memorial was placed here at Boniface Circle. It stands as a lasting tribute to the 2,100 local men and women who served in the military and the 81 men and 1 woman who were killed or listed as missing in action. The downtown post office is housed in this neoclassical style building constructed in the late 1930s. The post office has had a circuitous journey from being located in the train station to Garth Road, up to East Parkway, the Harwood building, and finally here at Chase Road. In the post office lobby are 2 historic murals by Gordon Samstag, commissioned during the Depression years as part of the Public Works program. One of these murals depicts Caleb Heathcote's acquisition of the land for the Manor of Scarsdale from Anne Richbell, the widow of John Richbell, who originally acquired the land in 1661. While the depiction is somewhat idealized, the painting is a historical reminder of how far Scarsdale has come from 1701 to the vibrant village it is today.